It's the Friday edition of Business Morning on Channels Television. Good morning and you're welcome to the show. I'm Ini John Mekwa. Well, let's start with updates from the global oil space. Oil prices climbed today, heading for gains of more than 2% for the week on increasing signs of tight supply over the next few months as rocketing gas and coal prices took a switch to oil products. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures rose 30 cents to $81.61 a barrel, adding to an 87-cent jump yesterday. The contract was heading for a 3% gain on the week. Brent crude futures rose 28 cents to $84.28 a barrel after picking up 82 cents in the previous session, leaving the contract set for a 2.3% rise for the week. Analysts point to a sharp drop in OECD oil stockpiles to their lowest level since 2015. Demand has picked up with the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, with a further boost coming from industry turning away from expensive gas and coal to fuel oil and diesel for power. The International Monetary Fund is predicting that the pandemic has permanently lowered the path of real GDP in sub-Saharan Africa, suggesting a loss of real per capita output of close to 5.6%. In its latest issue of the Regional Economic Outlook report, which was released yesterday, the IMF estimates that SSA economy will grow by 3.7% this year and 3.8% next year, but notes that the region is on a different recovery path from much of the world. Briefing the media on major drivers of growth in SSA, the Director of Africa Department at the IMF, Abebe Selassie, stressed the region's recovery remains highly vulnerable to changes in the global outlook.
Against the backdrop of a context of weaker than expected growth, policymakers need to navigate amongst three formidable pressures: pressing spending needs to address the many social and human capital and infrastructure needs they face, limited borrowing capacity, given the already high public debt levels in most cases, and the time-consuming and politically difficult nature of mobilizing tax revenues. How deftly countries navigate this trilemma, as we've been calling it, will have a huge bearing on macroeconomic well-being of countries, as well as economic growth prospects.
Two other issues now. The retail sector includes any business or individual involved with selling products directly to consumers has had a major disruption, talking about COVID-19. The retail sector includes shops, department stores, supermarkets, market stalls, door-to-door sales people, and internet retailers. As just 5% penetration in Nigeria, over 80% of shopping in the country is carried out in traditional shops. Now, should we be concerned about this? Is Nigeria losing anything with this? We have Dr. Uchenna Uzo, Director, Africa Retail Academy at the Lagos Business School, to talk to this. Good to speak with you, Dr. Uzo. Good morning.
Morning, Ini. It's a pleasure to meet you. Thank you.
Good to speak with you too. So, retail penetration in Nigeria currently is estimated at 5%, lower than, other African countries. Should we be worried about this? Is this a problem for us?
Well, first I would say retail penetration in terms of digital retail penetration is what is at 5%. What we see is that retail in Nigeria and largely in Africa is highly unstructured, and therefore 90% of retailing activity on the continent happens through unstructured markets. Should we be concerned? Yes, we should be concerned because on the one hand, if we can put some more structure, if we can use technology more efficiently, if we can borrow from some of the trends happening in more advanced economies, it will help to accelerate the growth of retail and the capacity for retail to contribute to our GDP. However, there are exciting opportunities that even working traditionally allow us to do. There is a way that being on the ground and being very close to the consumer actually makes it possible to sell more, over time. But I must say that retail is also happening in many other sectors, not just our traditional shopping sectors, but also in restaurants, in pharmaceutical chains, hotels, even banks. And so we need a broader understanding of what it takes to win in retail. And all these different sectors can learn from each other, in my view.
Okay, but let's even review it a bit. I know with COVID, even without COVID, the disruption is that technology is infused into everything, especially in the retail. Then with COVID, we see a lot of adoption or adaptation. How are we doing in Nigeria when we talk about this adapting to digital and internet-driven retail sector?
So in Nigeria, I would say there's been an uptick from the beginning of the pandemic in terms of the percentage adoption rate, within the e-commerce space. This has happened a lot with a lot of retail businesses, but also lots of conventional businesses now have a digital presence. However, the issue that a number of businesses are facing now is that it's not just enough to go online. It's not just enough to sell online. You have to also know how to connect your digital selling with your physical selling. And that's where many organizations are having challenges because both channels have to speak to each other. And so technology can help in that way, but having a better trained sales team that knows how to connect the dots is something that is important. And therefore, the outlook, I would say, is that digitization and the use of e-commerce platforms is only going to grow in Nigeria. However, those who will win are those who know how to carefully combine physical with digital in a seamless way, such that customers can order, digitally and collect physically, or vice versa, in my view.
So when we look at a case in point with Kenya, they've done a lot when it comes to, the e-payment. Even in the rural areas, a lot, even in open markets, little stalls, they deal with e-payment. Do you see that happening in Nigeria anytime soon? And as long as we are not there, what are we missing out?
So I see that there's going to be growth. I mean, if we cite, for example, the fact that 5G, the whole 5G network technology has been introduced. If we look at what is happening in Nigeria's fintech space and the amount of foreign direct investment that is coming into that, the indicators are clear that we are moving more in the direction of digital in the way that we sell and in the way that we relate to the customer. So I think that the future is bright. If we look at Kenya, absolutely, you are right. There's been an acceleration towards digitization, but the traditional channels are still very vibrant in Kenya. In fact, they have had to step back a little bit from digital to embrace what the traditional channels are doing. I don't know if you are aware that a couple of supermarket chains, namely especially Nakumatt, closed down in Kenya for various reasons when they were looking towards digitization and e-commerce penetration and so on and so forth. So what my thoughts really in this area are that there's going to be an increase in digitization, but at the same time, those who will win are those who are able to combine this carefully with traditional methods, because in the end, digital can solve everything, but digital can accelerate the rate of growth and scale that businesses have.
So let's say measuring now, because at the moment we see over 80% of shopping is still carried out in traditional shops as opposed to supermarket stores and stuff like that. So let's say in the nearest future, where do you see this tilting to?
Okay, I'm not a prophet, but I'm going to hazard a guess. So I see perhaps in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going we're still going to see a mix of traditional and digital, but probably we will get to a state where it's about 50-50, perhaps in the next 5 to 10 years, depending on how customer lifestyles evolve. Remember also that retail and the digitization of retail is also largely driven by consumer lifestyle and customer needs. What they want, where they want it, how they want it, when they want it. And so as the customers and consumers become more demanding of the need to have technology-enabled solutions to help them get products and services they need, then the faster, the adoption of e-commerce as, a credible way of selling. Of course, there are also trust issues that need to be dealt with. Trust and margin issues. On the side of trust, many people don't believe that e-commerce works, or they feel that fake products or not so high quality products might be sold to them. So these issues need to be addressed. The trust deficit, which is not just in Nigeria, it's all over Africa and even in some other parts of the world. And then the traditional retailers that we have, many don't actually believe in e-commerce yet. So there needs to be adequate work done to help them understand the power of e-commerce, what it can do for them. It's about educating them to see the opportunities, and also working out, the margins, working out the distribution and logistic problems around retail. These are issues that actually need to be addressed if we want to accelerate e-commerce in Nigeria and in Africa.
Well, that's a lot to focus on. But there's also the question of, are there enough incentives to push this switch, from the traditional to the e-commerce?
Well, in my view, I think there are quite a number of incentives. They may not be enough, to be honest, but there are incentives. The fact that we're having a growing number of young, trendy customers who and consumers who are attached to global brands, who can buy from Amazon, they can buy online, they can buy foreign brands, and at the tip of their fingers. And so if we in Nigeria or in Africa are not as agile, are not up to date with what is happening in the e-commerce space, definitely we're going to lose our share. Definitely we're going to have a case where customers in these parts of the world, in Africa, are going to continuously prefer global brands to local indigenous brands, which, by the way, is what the latest rankings around top brands in Africa say. People tend now to prefer Nike, Microsoft, Apple, top big brands as their major brands before even looking at African brands. And this is largely driven by e-commerce. Therefore, in my thoughts, it's really about working out these problems carefully through partnerships, through integrations, and it's looking at other sectors and looking at what they are doing to embrace digital, the banking sector, the insurance sector, and trying to see how these different things happening can be deployed into a traditional retail setting for growth.
And you also said something earlier about trust, because I'm sure you've heard of what I ordered for versus what I got. Sometimes
Yes.
these things happen. How do you think, or whose responsibility is it to take care of things like this? Because these are some of the discouraging factors to people embracing e-commerce.
Exactly, absolutely. So in terms of whose responsibility it is, it's the responsibility of the e-commerce company and also the suppliers, those who supply those products and services, to keep to the agreements. There are service level agreements, there are standards of quality, but perhaps the scrutiny and the controls and the monitoring of how and when things get to the customer need to be improved upon. It also means that perhaps feedback is not being used adequately. Customers always give feedback about what they are not happy about. And so e-commerce platforms that are responsive to feedback will be able to, address these issues. The return policies also can help if they are strengthened, if people see what they don't like and they're able to return them at no cost to them. I think these are things that will reinforce and give that trust back.
Okay, but when you talk about that, don't we have like a regulatory agency that's, I mean, what if it happens to me and the salesperson refuses to take responsibility or to do a refund? Then who can I run to as a consumer?
So there are regulatory agencies. NAFDAC is there. There's the Consumer Protection Agency, and depending on what is being bought or sold, there are different regulatory agencies that one could escalate matters to. And this is a way that we can actually hold suppliers and e-commerce platforms accountable for what they sell. So I think those regulatory agencies are available, but I think it's also about educating the consumers about the options they have for sending feedback, for complaining if they are not happy with things, and for celebrating positive things that they have experienced through these e-commerce platforms. That I think is what will help. And as more people adopt, these e-commerce platforms and share their experiences online about shopping through those platforms, I think that will also help to change the mindset and reduce the trust deficit that we see. The other thing too, I think, is that not everything can be sold online. I think there's always the temptation amongst people in business to think everything can go online. There are a lot of B2B businesses that don't need a strong online presence to sell what they sell. There are a lot of large ticket transaction items, like seriously large real estate property, for example. People want to see and touch and feel what they want to buy before they do so. So we need to be careful also about putting everything online, trying to carefully think about what it is that people want to see online, how, when, and then sell it to them at the adequate price. We can actually use the online presence to introduce what they will see and touch physically. We can also use, some people are using now augmented reality and virtual reality to help people touch in a digital platform what they are going to buy. And I think these are new trends and new ways we can adopt here in Nigeria and in Africa that can reduce the trust deficit that we see.
So as a retail academy, of which you are a director, what are you doing to help boost e-commerce in Nigeria?
So the Retail Academy's purpose really is to achieve and enable the transformation of retail in Africa by giving people who are into retail career development and enablement opportunities, lifelong learning, capacity building, networking opportunities, research. There are actually certificate programs now for people at different levels of retail. So we have the certificate program for retail managers, certificate program for retail practitioners, and certificate programs for retail executives. All these are targeted at addressing capacity issues in each of those cadres of retail. Because what we see at the end of the day is that retail, being as huge as it is still largely neglected from the point of view of formal education. There are very few institutions in Africa that are paying close attention to retail, whether it's e-commerce or the traditional methods. And people have to go abroad to learn what it takes to do retail properly. Lagos Business School, through its academy, is addressing that gap, is giving people in retail in this part of the world hope, is giving them the opportunity to scale, is giving them the opportunity to see retail as a career. That is also something people don't see very much here because there isn't that formal education and support through their time in the career space. And this is what Lagos Business School is really offering. The other thing too that the academy will achieve is advocacy, is supporting the government in having a retail policy, and then also linking people involved in retail and e-commerce here in Nigeria with other parts of Africa, so that this intra-regional trade, which the AFTA agreement is looking at achieving, will be more accelerated through the digital space and through the traditional space.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Uchenna Uzo, Director, Africa Retail Academy at the Lagos Business School. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us this morning.
Thank you so much, Ini.
So we'll take a break now. After the break, how can workforce productivity be improved? That's our next conversation. Do join us again. It's Business Morning on Channels Television. You're welcome back. Well, at a time when the world, Nigeria included, is working on recovering from the pandemic, increased productivity, which will ensure the optimization of resources, human and otherwise, comes to the front burner. Author of Mind Shift and a thought miner, Mr. Omololu Ogumade, shares some insights on how workforce productivity can be improved on, and he joins us here in the studio. Good to speak with you, Mr. Molulu. Good morning.
Morning, Nini. How are you today?
I'm fine. I'm good. And you?
Good. It's a pleasure to be here.
Good. So how intentional are both employers and employees on this issue of optimizing workforce? Or do we just go to work, you know, because we are paid to work, we just go and do what we are told to do, and employers say, okay, you do this and I do this?
And well, it's, you cannot put a generalization over it, because the reality is when you go from organization to organization, you find their realities, the way they work. But the ideal is that there should be templates set for the employee to know what is expected by the employer in any particular organization. But as we engage with businesses, you'll find out that there's always like a gap, you know. So it goes back to our discussions on mind shift in terms of how we think both from the perspective of the employee and the employer, you know, so we can then start to break it down, because those are the things that eventually impact on productivity in any particular organization that you are looking at in that
So
context.
this is different from what you receive on your letter, you know, when you are employed. You are given responsibility. So at what point does the employer communicate, you know, this to the employee?
Yeah, you see, what I've also, you know, come to see is that when the typical employee gets the employment letter, the engagement notice, the focus is on the pay package. You understand? Because, you know, our economic realities make it such that everybody is looking at how do I go out in the morning and come back home with enough to live and then to take care of those who depend on me. So once the interview session is over and you're getting the letter, what you're looking at is, okay, so what did they eventually offer? You know, and that takes away from mindfulness, which is one of the things that I train on. You know, mindfulness is a principle that gets you in the moment, both emotionally, intellectually, with what you are engaged with at every moment, like what we're doing now. We have to be mindful about what we're doing now to get the best out of this. So once mindfulness is taken out of that whole transaction and it's just about naira and kobo, you find out that there is no placement, there is no situation of myself in what my employer necessarily expects of me. I'm just waking up, going to that office, knowing that in 26 days I'm going to get X amount. So it's not so much about what I deliver now, but what I get out of it. And once the employer is unable to communicate to that employee that there are other things to be considered, there's going to be a lacuna in the area of productivity. And that is a reality that we face across board here in Nigeria and probably, around the world too.
So
maybe to
where
varying
is the
degrees.
place of passion? Because I mean, it's common knowledge that if you love what you do, then you're not just doing it to get paid.
Exactly.
You're doing it because you want to make impact, you want to add value, you want to also derive joy from it. Where is that? We
Now,
have
the problem we have is nobody is really, well, let me not say nobody, but the percentage of people that are getting employed based on passion, based on what I love to do, if you compare it to those who are not, they are in a minority. Because of the, in quotes, scarcity of job placements in an economy where we have over 30% unemployment rate. So the average person out there who's looking for a job is just looking for a job. Is basically just looking for a paycheck. So that's why you go into industry, you find a Yoruba graduate working in a bank, and he's a teller. So it's not as if he's even working in a department where that background of having studied Yoruba becomes useful. But he's just on the counter collecting cash and delivering cash to people who come to make a withdrawal. So it's so much less about passion in industry now as it is about getting paid, just surviving in this, in quotes, harsh environment. So what you discover is, for some, as they get into that organization and get more integrated into the business of that organization, probably see an aspect of that business that they really like. So they start to train themselves to get passionate about that. So very few people you will find in our environment now who are doing what they do based on passion.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, is there a way, for instance, an individual gets a job out of necessity? Is there a way to get, I mean, because for you to optimally get, the workforce or the benefit that you should get from a personnel or a workforce or human resources, you have to get the person's mind engaged.
Yeah.
Is there a way to get people, even though it's not their primary area of passion, to get them to be mindful and committed, to that?
Yes, there is. And that is where the HR departments, the training departments come to play. Because, okay, for example, using myself, as an example, I'm a graduate of the sciences. But by the time I was graduating, I had two thought directions. I was either going to be a researcher based on science, or I was going to go and do something else. So the first job offer I got was to be a sales rep, So I took it because I didn't want to stay at home. But I discovered from going out to sell that I actually, enjoyed the engagement with people. And, having grown up as an extrovert anyway, so it was easy for me to get into the mindset of a salesman. And I just loved it. And that's what I've done all my life until now, that even though I'm still a salesman now, but I'm selling, concepts now rather than
but
products.
was that done for you, or was it something you did for yourself?
No,
What
it
I'm
wasn't
trying to
done
say,
for me, really.
Yeah, so it's not about training or coaching.
Exactly.
It's about you finding a reason to love.
Yes, well, there was this synergy of sorts in the sense that having become a sales rep, the company I was with did some training for us in sales and marketing. So in those training sessions, I discovered, okay, so this is why I'm like this. Okay, this is why I like to do this. This is why I like to speak like this. So there was some synergy. So that's why I said the HR and training departments of organizations need to be more on the job in that regard. And we talk about assessment right at the interview level. There should be an HR presence of course, in the interview committee. And such a person should be trained by just observing this person that's being interviewed, to start penning down possibilities within the realities of that organization and this individual that we're interviewing. Like, for example, the last paid employment my wife was involved with, when she was being interviewed, she was interviewed as an HR director. But right there in the interview, they made her understand that they were planning to bring her in because the person that was occupying the seat they were grooming her for was going to be seconded to corporate communications, which was really a core. But she was handling HR pending they are getting a proper HR person. So that's a company that had a plan. But when you're just staffing for the purpose of, filling the seats and tables without being specific about what this business will require going forward. That is where the problems usually come. So you find out that in such organizations, productivity is low because things were not done strategically ab initio.
So what about the issue of motivation? Where does it come into, increasing productivity?
Well, motivation really, it's wide.
Exactly.
So,
it's not just about the salary.
Exactly. That's what I'm going to, self-motivation, motivation in terms of the environment you create for the workers, motivation in terms of communication within the system, across the ranks. So all of those things end up impacting on staff motivation. Is this an environment where the people that come to work can really, really work in terms of producing at their optimum and enjoying being in that environment? Or are they coming because they know, well, I need this salary? So all of that is managerial now. Management has to create an environment that motivates, an environment that people wake up in the morning and they are glad to go to, an environment that they are looking forward to be in for 8, 10 hours, 12 hours of a day, depending on the kind of job they are doing. So that is from management and ownership. But then the other side of it is the individual who understands that, okay, now I have a responsibility to this organization and I must stay, in quote, motivated to be able to deliver at my utmost best. So it goes both ways, but the individual side will be more encouraged by what the organization has already put in place. So that's why I remember I was privileged to train a company last month, last week of September. I trained over 30 staff in that organization, a fintech, in 2 days. We had 2 batches. And I could sense a sense of excitement about the office itself, the premises, the job. But there was also a big sense of demotivation in terms of the communication across the ranks. So when we had our interactive sessions, there was a lot of feedback saying that they found it difficult to go, up the chain. Their line managers, communicating with the line managers.
Isn't that more like a culture thing in Nigeria?
Exactly, which was why the training we did was on culture and vision. So it was just, apt for them because I trained them on organizational culture and vision. So it was a cultural thing, which is why the HR person chose that training module as the first to start with, because they needed to readdress the cultural setting in that organization.
But such trainings, a lot of times they're interesting, you're excited about it. But when it comes to the implementation, it's a whole lot.
Yes.
Implementing it, especially when you have to go from the top and all that, it's a whole lot. So do we really see the fruit of this training, or do we just get excited about the training?
The truth of it is, it now depends on the organization at management level. Because if you have paid a consultant to perform a training, to carry out a training, what was the purpose of it in the first place? Are you doing it because you just want to have training budget? Are you doing it because there is a need that you are ready to attack and then to address within the organization? So we're still, we've gone beyond the training, but there's still feedback between myself and the management, trying to make sure that the steps that need to be taken thereafter are put in place.
Now, when we talk about goal setting and assessment, professionally or normally, should it be at the beginning of a year, there's a goal? That's the HR's duty. The HR has a lot to do, actually. Yeah. And then assess it at the end without sentiments. That's also another thing.
There's always office politics and all of that. But, when we talk about goal setting, targets, we go into definitions now. Because from experience, we have discovered that a lot of times we use these terminologies, but we don't know the meaning of those terminologies. So when you talk about goals, and in most places, I ask a question, who can define a goal? You find that people are defining targets. So what is a goal? A goal is something that challenges you to become better. But if I were to ask, what is a goal? Somebody will say, okay, we want to build our company into $1 million business in the next 6 months. That's not a goal, that's a target.
That's a target.
So a goal comes to you to make you better. A target is what you achieve as you hit your goal. So those are, like you said, HR and training
Yeah, so the HR needs a lot of
responsibilities.
training also before.
Exactly. So we have training for management and senior staff, then training for cadre.
Yes.
So
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Molulu Ogumade, author, mind shift, and a thought miner. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us
Thank
this
you,
morning.
Thank you, Ini. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, good to have you. So, well, I wonder what difference that will make. I do hope that that will make a difference in our targets and management of human resources. But for now, we have to switch over to the market and find out how the market fared yesterday. But that will be right after this short break. You're welcome back. Over to Will now.
Good morning, Ini.
Good morning, Will.
It's a very bright morning for me. I'm so happy because bullish sentiments persisted.
You're so happy. How much can come into your accounts? Oh, you're happy for
237
investors in the equities
naira.
market. Why you
237 billion naira
into your account?
Well, coming into my account one way or the other.
All right.
So we see that the equities market is still on its rolls, having fun. Investors' interest in bellwethers, Boa Cement, MTN Nigeria, and Airtel Africa led the all-share index higher by 1.1%, and we'll see that at 41,704.11 points, inching closer to the 42,000 level there amid a positive market breadth, and the market value increased, like I said earlier, by 237 billion naira. Now we'll see the month-to-date and the year-to-date gains increase to 3.7 and 3.6% respectively. Now the month-to-date gain is still ahead by just 1 percentage point, and we're hoping the year-to-date gain is going to catch up very, very soon and probably overcome that or supersede it. Now, we're going to talk more about what happened in the market. We have Afolabi Benro. He's a stockbroker at IBT Stockbrokers, Stomach IBT Stockbrokers. Good morning, Afolabi.
Good morning, Will. Thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. Afolabi, we're having a bullish run. You know, the market is still very bullish, riding on the back of MTN, Airtel, and Boa Cement. What kind of transactions would you say took place with these stocks?
Okay, so yesterday the market opened with MTN trading about 2 billion shares around 172 naira. That was flat compared to the previous day. However, towards the close of the market, and actually most of the transactions went to around 172, but towards the close of the market, there was a transaction of about 100 and something thousand shares that traded at 174, and that's actually what lifted MTN to close 1.16%. At 174. We saw something similar in the likes of Nigerian breweries. Nigerian breweries was up 7.4 yesterday. It closed at 51.45. A similar transaction of about 100,000 shares, 51.45 for Nigerian breweries to close up. Boa Cement, we saw something similar as well. Boa Cement closed up about 6.12%, closed at 72. Another 100,000 shares thereabouts traded. And that changed the price from the previous day to 72 naira. So those kind of transactions were what was driving activity mostly yesterday.
That's interesting to know. Well, when was the last time the market index went up over 1%? And why don't we see that often?
Well, we wish to see it more often, but I mean, checking historically, I think the closest time to now was towards the end of the last quarter. On the 29th of September, the index closed up about 189 basis points, and on the 30th, it closed up about 159 basis points. Obviously, we need catalysts and for investors to be interested in the stocks for activities to be this bullish. But we're hoping that the bullish one that we've been seeing, that we saw yesterday, would continue in today's session.
So the opening calls are already good this morning?
Yes, I mean, so far we've seen the Nigerian Exchange Group, which is now listed on the Nigerian Exchange itself. It's up about 6%. It was listed last week, Friday, by introduction. It's up about 41% week on week. So far this morning, we're seeing the rally there continue in the market. PZ is also up. It's trading at the maximum price of today, about 5.90 kobo. It's up about 9.26%. And then looking at First Bank as well, we've seen some activities there. About 17 million has traded so far. It's up about 1.24%. So far, indications are the market is going to close in a positive today.
We're looking forward to that too, Afolabi. Thank you so much for your insights on the program. And Ini, that's how we wrap up the market report for today.
Thank you, Will, and enjoy the rest of your day. Well, let's do an opening call to London after this break. Do join us then. You're welcome back. We now head to London with Juliana joining in from our London studios. Hello, Juliana. Good morning.
Good morning, Annie.
So there are reports of rising cases of COVID-19, a source of worry to the prime ministers and, of course, Britons generally. More than 50,000 COVID cases, and now the prime minister is talking about a booster jab. How is that going? How is that being received?
Yeah, there are major concerns, Innie, that the UK is facing yet another COVID-19 crisis. We've had about 40 to 50,000 daily infections being reported every single day. I think it became even more serious on Tuesday when official data showed that over 229 people had lost their lives. Now, if you compare that to the peak of over 1,000 a day, it doesn't seem that high, but of course, every death is a loss to a family, and this has become the trajectory. We are starting to see that the cases are rising. Yesterday, there were over 100 deaths, about 959 people entered into hospital, and we are starting to hear from NHS bosses saying that, you know, people are lying up outside waiting for rooms. Hospitals, ambulances cannot get into the hospitals fast enough. We did hear in a special televised address on Wednesday from Sajid Javid, the health minister, and he said no plans yet to go into any sort of restrictions. But again, a lot of critics say this is what the government have always been doing. They're always on the back burner, always very, very late to respond, which is why we still have one of the highest death rates in the world. So the drumbeat isn't looking good, Innie. Who knows whether or not the UK will be heading into another lockdown before the end of the year. But with the nature of this government over the past 18, 19, 20 months, it's usually the media that lead with the news, and then the Prime Minister follows. And at the moment, it seems to be the media that are suggesting there could be some sort of restriction heading our way before the end of the year.
Well, I guess the media will just have to continue to blaze the trail. Now, when you compare this with inflation and food and fuel shortages, and now we see that retail has fallen, is this saying that the economic rebound is fading in the country?
Well, potentially, but it's certainly consumer confidence is at its lowest it's been since the beginning of the pandemic, and the inflation rate has a lot to do with this, currently standing at about 3.1%. We have data from the British Retail Consortium showing that retail sales have fallen yet again. This is the 5th consecutive month that retail sales have fallen. This is the longest falling streak on record. In September, sales were down 0.2%. This follows a 0.6% slump during the month of August. And, you know, with all of the labour supplies, the shortages, it is starting to affect the prices of food. I believe we were talking earlier on your show, Innie, about Unilever, and they've got several popular products in people's homes. They've risen their prices by 4.2%. So it is starting to reach down to the consumer. Online sales are still, you know, going as well as they could be, but since the pandemic, I don't think people have really been going into high street stores as much as they did beforehand, and it is starting to reflect on this data.
All right, thank you so much, Juliana. We'll talk to you later on at 1:30.
Thank you.
So let's head to the crypto space now. Tapering in the market cap from $2.63 trillion yesterday about this time to $2.57 trillion, and that's a 1.29% decrease over the last day. Meanwhile, the 24-hour volume increased by over 3% at $122.36 billion. That's more than $2 billion added to the market in 24 hours. The total volume in DeFi is currently $15.37 billion, indicating 12.56% of the total crypto market 24-hour volume. The volume of all stable coins is now $95.72 billion, and that's 78.23% of the total crypto market 24-hour volume. Now, let's see how Bitcoin is doing. Its dominance dropped 0.69%. It claimed 45.85% of the total crypto market this morning, while the price is still around $62,000, although it's now closer, almost $63,000. Its 24-hour volume dropped by almost $3 billion in 24 hours. Let's look at Ethereum now. A slight drop also in the price of Ethereum, but it's still above $4,000. Perhaps the increase in its volume can be linked to the drop in price, almost $2 billion more than yesterday at about this time at $26.15 billion. Now let's go to the gainers table. Tether has moved from the losers table to the gainers. They're very marginal. Solana retains its spots on the green table, about $15 in 24 hours. Polkadot is still rallying up more than $1 in 24 hours. We see there most of those favorites are there on the green table. Let's go to the losers table now. This morning, Binance Coin is on the losers table this morning, shared almost 1% of its share price. Cardano follows. XRP moves to the losers table, losing about 4 cents. Even Doge just shed about 2%. It was going for about 25 cents this morning. Well, we have Michael Naji joining us now to share his thoughts with us on the market. Hello, Michael. Good morning.
Good morning, Annie. How are you? Happy Friday.
Great, and you?
I'm
So,
good.
is there a risk of a sharp decline in the price of Bitcoin?
Yeah, there definitely is. And in moments like this, when we break all-time high territory in Bitcoin, we tend to come down in terms of what you want to look at are key indicators like the open interest, and it's at all-time highs, similar to back in May and June of last year. And as we go higher, we're just going to keep on increasing that. But you tend to see some kind of washing out of market participants, and it's called a rinsing out. Some market participants would like the term it. But yes, in times like this, when we've established new all-time highs, it's definitely way more frothy than before.
And looking at Ethereum now, it's done well, hitting the 4,000 mark. Do you see it sticking around there, or do you see a correction anytime soon?
So in terms of Ethereum, I think Ethereum can go much higher. Right now, if you look at the on-chain metrics, we're just flashing on euphoria. And so if this is a sustained rally on Bitcoin, what you want to see is you want to see the Bitcoin long-term NUPL value. You want to see that flash euphoria, and we're just about to flash that. And so in situations like that, you can see Ethereum almost 3 to 4 or 5x at the current levels that it's at, and it's definitely it's not topped yet. Conservatively, you're looking at estimates for between $5,000 to $8,000 for one Ethereum at the end of this cycle, but optimistically, it could go as high as $18,000 to $24,000 for one Ethereum.
So where do you see it as, let's say, by the end of the year, by December? Where do you see Ethereum?
Ethereum should be somewhere higher, closer to $5,000 to $6,000 to be conservative by end of this year, like Q4.
All right. So which of the coins are you bullish on this time?
Right now I have rotated into altcoins, and I'm quite bullish on everything that basically ecosystem coins in the layer ones that are doing well. And so in that you have Solana, and in Solana you have Mango markets in that, and as well you have AVAX, you have Banquai in that as well. And I think long term, those L1 ecosystem plays is what returns the most for market participants, just because the ecosystem, because of how congested Ethereum has become and how expensive it's become, other layer ones will accrue value, and the bet basically is that their ecosystems will derive more value than the underlying value there.
And this weekend, how do you see? Do you see a red or a green weekend, especially when it comes to Bitcoin?
Well, I think it's going to be mostly a positive weekend. just because of the fact that we have washed out a lot of the leverage that you saw earlier this week. I think right now we're trading closer to 62,000, and sometime in the week we were at 67, 66 almost. So it is quite healthy. Had we not seen that pullback, I would have been more hesitant, but definitely it looked a little bit more on the clearer side. So 100%, the weekend could be more bullish than the last day or two, especially also with the ETF. There's been a lot of volume coming every day. Almost 10 to 20% of the volume on a daily basis now is just that ETF, and so it's very positive. And so overall, you should expect Bitcoin prices to go much higher going into Q1 and end of Q4 this year.
All right, I'll watch over at the weekend and see how it ends by Monday. Thank you so much, Michael, for being a part of the show.
Thank you so much, Innie, and have a great weekend.
You too. So that's it on the program. Thank you so much for being a part of it. It's been a great week. Let's do it again next week, God willing. I'm Innie John Mekwa. But do remember, 1:30, I'll be right back with Business Incorporated, and I will give you updates from the world of business.